Leela. Leela is the one that is the master pianist, and she has been making music to collaborate with the messages that I've been putting out.
Hi, Sam.
Hi,
How are you?
I am doing very well. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Good.
Good. Okay.
What would you like to talk about?
Well, we were just talking about the subject of this child abuse and trafficking and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead and express what it is that you were talking about first so I can address it directly.
Well, I had just finished watching a movie amongst many movies, and we all know about the sex trafficking industry being billions of dollars, the largest actually, and the movie I was watching was set in India, but it was about you know, adoption shelters where girls are being mistreated, abused, and yeah, it's not such a good subject, but it brings up a lot of anger, brings up a lot of wanting justice. So, what are your thoughts?
I understand how that brings out anger, brings up these feelings that we have whenever we see things that seem to be unfair, and it invokes whatever it is within us that we see it, we react in that way. So I was talking to you about this earlier, and I've come through and a situation. I incarnated this life, in a situation where I was in a very abusive situation when I was a child. So I'll express or explain a little bit about that first, so
Mm-hmm.
so it can give you a backdrop of where I'm coming from whenever I say what I say. I have been through a sexually abusive childhood. I've been through a very
Mm-hmm.
physically abusive childhood, and I was in foster homes till I was 7. And even in the foster homes, there was abuse, but not sexual abuse. But when I went back to live with my dad, from the time that I was 7 until I ran away from home at when I turned 15, I was sexually abused during that period of time, and he was very, very physically and mentally abusive in the family. And he sexually abused, all of my sisters and my older brother and me. And so my older brother committed suicide later in life. And so going through that process, I was the only one really that stood up to my dad and just said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I didn't care if I died at a certain point. I wasn't going to allow that. I wasn't going to partake in those energies anymore. I made a choice not to. And so I went through a process later in my life where I learned to forgive my father. It took me 15 years to forgive him. And it took a long time because um, I didn't understand the process. I was just listening to the Holy Spirit that said, forgive your father every day. And every day I would think, this is impossible. And why should I forgive him? And I was the victim. He was the perpetrator. Why would I ever forgive somebody that did such things? And so through that process, I learned that in truth, might not make sense to some people, but in truth, I was only forgiving myself. And you might ask why. How is it that I could only be forgiving myself? And that is simply because I realized at a certain point that my physical father, whom I thought was somebody else outside of me, was separate from me, and that he did something to me when he was only a representation of what was going on within myself. So when I was judging him, literally, I was judging myself. So I had to forgive myself for that judgment upon myself. And the only way that I could heal that was to feel those feelings that were coming up over and over and over. And they were very intense. And I had a lot of anger and hatred. And I thought I needed to go out and kill people. So I joined the army. That's why I joined the army, by the way.
Oh, I see.
So angry. And I thought if there was a way for me to go out there and kill the bad guys, then I could make this a better place. So I approached it from that point until I started to realize, until the Holy Spirit was able to awaken me to the point where I realized that it's not happening with outside of me. So anytime we see things that are happening in this world, one of the deepest understandings that we can come to is that these things are happening within our own field of energy that we think we're separate is an illusion. We're not separate from these things. So when we judge them, whenever we put these energies, these lower vibrational energies called judgment and fear and anger and hatred towards something that somebody else that we think is outside of us, we're literally giving that more energy, more negative energy into this world and making it worse. We're not making it better. Justice is only another word for judgment. Okay, it's not real. Judgment isn't real. Why? Because our God, our Father, Mother, has judged none of us. If there was ever a time that our Creator would ever judge us, we would cease to exist. Because we've all made choices to separate ourselves from God, and we play in the illusion of separation, but it's never been real. We've always been within our Creator's energy of love, because we are love, and that's what we're made out of. So all of the things that we think are not love are manufactured illusions. And it takes a while to get that, I understand. So a lot of times whenever I tell people that see these atrocities happening in the world, that these are things that can be healed by forgiveness through love, not through anger, not through judgment or justice, but by healing the feelings that come up within us. And that's why when we see something that invokes feelings of anger or hatred, those are things that can be healed within us. And that's our job right there. And when we practice doing that over and over, we get very good at it, and it becomes something that happens very quickly, very quickly. So whenever you're in a real world circumstance and you're so used to listening to your higher self, as you know, you asked, what would you do in a certain circumstance? Well, you don't really have to worry about it if you're used to listening to your higher self, because you don't know your ego, or the part of you that does want to fear and be in judgment, doesn't know what to do until the circumstance happens. And once it has given up its so-called willing, or once it's willing to allow the higher self to show it what to do and becomes used to that over and over, then you'll automatically listen to your higher self in every circumstance, and you won't have to figure it out. Figuring it out, when you stop and you think, oh, what do I do here? Letting go of the idea that we know what to do and allowing our higher self to flow through us is always for the betterment of all of our brothers and sisters. But it starts with us. It starts with healing those feelings that come up within us. So, a lot of times whenever I say there's no victims in this world and I'm talking to somebody, it triggers this anger, because how could there not be victims? In order for there to be victims, our creator would have to be a victim, because we're created in the image of our father, of our mother, our creator, the source. We are all created in that image, which is love. And our creator has never been a victim. So the idea of victimhood is something that we chose to experience. It doesn't make it real. It's sure enough real in the sense that we feel all of the energies that come from those choices. However, it's not the reality of who we are. So whenever we let go of the idea that these are realities and that they're only choices, that we want to experience this, we want to experience some anger and some frustration towards the bad guys, quote unquote, then we can realize that those energies are inside of us, and the only way to heal them is to bring the light of love that we are into those energies.
The light of love.
So I hope that helps.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. It does make sense. It all begins with ourselves, and then it can, carry outwards into the universe and collectively, hopefully, make a huge difference.